how a basic flow comes from request and response is sent back to a browser. Step by step we have seen what happens at what place, and then we have looked at one example. So we have looked at examples and taken a flow of a particular web request and how it comes to the server and then goes to the servlet, and we have seen servlet lifecycle also yesterday. And then today we are going to move into two important objects. One is servlet config, and another one is a servlet context object. So if you remember in the process of executing a servlet, the Tomcat container will actually load the servlet which we want to instantiate, okay, which we want to request for. So at the time of servlet instantiation and initialization, the init method will be called, which is defined in the servlet interface. And if you remember init method, let me open Eclipse. So in the servlet interface, we have a method called init method, which will be executed at the time of initialization of the servlet. We have seen this when we are given load on startup to the servlet, and then at the time of server startup, this actually gets the servlet is getting loaded into the memory, and then instantiation will be done. That means an object will be created, and initialization means the init method will be called, and servlet config object will be given to init method. So there are two things you have to look into this matter. Who is calling the init method and who is providing the servlet config object? Basically, whenever a method is executed in Java, someone should be calling the method and someone should be passing the variables whatever are defined inside that braces. So according to servlet technology and servlet lifecycle, the servlet loading, instantiation and initialization will happen because of the Tomcat container. Tomcat container is responsible for loading, that means picking up the servlet bytecode and placing it into the memory, and then creating an object for it, which is nothing but instantiation, and then initialization, that means starting up the servlet by calling the init method. So all these responsibilities will be taken care by Tomcat container itself, and we don't need to explicitly call anything, or we don't need to create any object in that regard. So servlet config is a predefined object which will be created by Tomcat container and send it to the init method. Now we are going to look into the servlet config object. What are the advantages of using the servlet config object, and how can you use it in servlet technology? So that is what we are going to discuss today. So let's get back to the notes here. So if you look at the the line which states it is an object which will provide all the configuration details of a particular servlet. So what does this mean is we know that every servlet configuration is done in web.xml file using servlet tag, okay? And if there is any other information like extra information or some other parameters that you want to pass to the servlet, how can you do that? Maybe you may ask me the question, why do you need to pass some extra values? Say for example, if you're connecting to a database through that servlet and you want to send the URL, username, password, and some other details to the servlet, how can you send it? One way to send the servlet information is by placing the configurations in the servlet itself. Say for example, as an example I have explaining. Say I want to pass to this servlet, servlet which is implementing servlet, I want to pass a DB configuration. That means a URL, password, and username. So what should I do? There is only one way till now, which we know that. What is that way? We can come to the servlet class and define a string URL, okay, which comes to DB, and username, which is again a string, and then give some username. In the same way, we'll have password also. Okay, so after passing these values, you can connect to the DB by using these values or by using JDBC connectivity. Okay, we'll come to JDBC in later, but now with these three values you can connect to DB. But what is the drawback of this approach? The drawback of this approach is you are hard coding the values in your Java file, first one. And the second one is, if you ever want to change the username, what should you do? You have to modify the Java code and then compile it and then deploy it. So, and actually in normal projects there is one more step which is very time consuming and which is very expensive step, that is testing part. Since we are using examples, it will be very simple. You just write it and say I did not affect any code. But if it's a bigger application, very big application, then how do you solve this problem? Okay, instead of just going and changing the DB configurations inside the Java file, how can you do that in any other file? So then comes the concept called a servlet config object. Say for example, you are configuring your servlet in web.xml file, right? So everybody does that. It is a syntax kind of thing. And at the time of servlet creation, what happens when you can send some data to it? How can you do that? And what is the backend object that is actually giving you that particular values when you set it in web.xml file? So for all these questions, the answer would be servlet config object. Okay, the servlet config object is an object which will have some extra details or extra information for a particular servlet. Okay, because I'm mentioning servlet stressfully is each servlet will have their own servlet config object, because if you remember the init method is for my servlet. For some other developer, he would be having his own init method and he would be having his own servlet config object, and he would be having his own information inside that servlet config object. So for that reason, servlet config scope, whatever scope is there, is only for one servlet. Okay, so and I was telling you, you can store information, you can save information, or you can pass details. So what is the kind of details that you can send is listed down here. The first one is initialization parameters. Okay, and the next one is logical name of the servlet, and then reference to the servlet context. Reference to the servlet context will come that in like half an hour, in the next half an hour. And initialization parameters are the parameters which are like an input values or a name value base which you give in web.xml file. The initialization parameters should be mentioned in web.xml file for each and every servlet. I mean, it is not a mandatory rule, but you have some information about a servlet, then you can place them in the initialization parameters. And what is the other method, other data that you can save? You can save logical name of the servlet. What is the logical name? Logical name is the servlet name that you give in the servlet tag. Okay, and reference to the servlet context. Servlet context is again another object, and that object can be retrieved with the help of servlet config only. Okay, so these are the three configuration details that a servlet config can save. So now servlet config, we have seen who creates it and where you can get it and what information it has. Okay, so now we'll see. We have seen this automatically be created at the time of init method, and as part of applications, 2 ways to get servlet config object. Okay, he's saying there are 2 ways you can get a servlet config object. One is using get servlet config. It is a direct method which is there in the servlet interface. If you remember, we have servlet name, init method, destro method, service method, and get servlet config method. Okay, so you can get it from that method, and the other one is by overriding your init method. You know the init method, right? If you override this, you can get the init config method also. Okay, so we'll see an example in a couple of minutes, but we have to see what more can be done using servlet config. So I said you can get the logical name of the servlet. How can you get the logical name? Once you get the servlet config object, which we are naming it as config here, you can use get servlet name. Get servlet name will return the value of whatever you have defined in the servlet name tag. So this would be same here and here, if you see. Okay. So this is the logical name of the servlet. This is the actual name, and this is the URL pattern. So the logical name would be whatever you name, give it in the servlet hyphen name tag. Okay, so that is one way you can use servlet config object. Another way we discussed is we can set initialization parameters. And how can you set initialization parameters is by using init param tag and whatever tags that are mentioned here. So this is a syntax that you can use for declaring initialization parameters for a servlet, and these initialization parameters can be retrieved with the help of servlet config in your Java code. That means in nothing but in your Java, in your servlet. Okay. So, and what is the syntax? You declare a init param stating that this is starting point of init param, and then you give a name and a value. This could be your URL and the URL, what actual URL. This could be your user. This could be your username, and this could be the actual username. So it is like a name value pair. Whatever we have, we say what is your name? It is a some XYZ. What is your age? Some XYZ. What do you do? So it has a direct relationship between a name value pair. Okay, and so how this happens is what he is explaining here. Whenever we send a request from client to server, the container will go to the web.xml file to pick up the servlet mapping which should be called. Okay, and at the time of evaluating this URL pattern, what servlet it should be called, what it will do is it will create the servlet config object and place the initialization parameters inside the servlet config object. Okay, and then they will be sent to the Tomcat container to init method, which is coming from servlet interface. Okay, and now you have set the parameter. How do you get the parameter in servlet or in a Java code? There is one method that you can use to get this parameter which you set for that servlet, and the method is get init parameter. The method signature is like this. It is public method which returns a string. That means when you pass the value to it, say for example if I pass a name, it will give me Aditya. So in that sense, this method will take the key here and it will return you the value in the form of string. Okay, so and how can you get it? You can use the config object again, config.get init parameter, and whatever data you want to get it as a name value pair. Okay, so this is how you can use it to store initialization parameters, get the servlet logical name, and get the servlet context object. Okay, so what we have here is another concept called as enumeration. Enumeration is nothing but a group of same values. See, for example, if there is only one parameter, init parameter in your servlet, you can get it easily with the help of get init parameter. But you don't know what are the configurations or what are the utilization parameters in the web.xml file. Then if you want to get all the initialization parameters, then you have to use the init param names method in the config object, and this will return an enumeration object. Enumeration is a Java concept, is a Java basic concept which will help you iterate through each element by using next and as next. Okay. So let's go to example now. So first one we have to see is so now we are looking at servlet config concept, and it can have init params. It can get you the logical name. It can get you the init parameters, it can get you the logical name, it can get you the servlet context, and the scope is only till one servlet. Okay, and what are the methods that you can get using can get the parameters from our, I'll list down here, parameters. It will take the string key which will return you the value, and get init. This is parameter. This is parameters. You don't send anything to it, but if you call on a particular config object, then it will return you whatever initialization parameters are configured for that particular config object. I mean servlet config object. Okay, so this is for only one servlet. Whenever you define something for that servlet, then it will not be available for other servlet, because each servlet will take different URL pattern, and they cannot communicate between each other. Okay, so now we'll go and look at the example. So if I want to get some or set some value to this first servlet, okay, what I'll do is I'll go and say init param. See, and this is also similar to load on startup. It will come only in the servlet tag itself. If you come out, okay, if you come out and declare this outside servlet, it will give you an error stating this should be inside servlet, and according to the XSD or XML, this is not matching up. Now, and this error is coming because we did not mention any one parameter. Okay, so that is why it is saying like that, param name and param value. So now param name is email. Okay, so this is declaring one parameter. Okay, so now we have set the init parameter. We'll see why this error is coming. If this doesn't work, we have to include some XSD, I guess. But now we have set a value which is an email ID, and we want to get it in our service. So we have get servlet config here. So what we'll do is we'll just call that get servlet config, and we'll set it to the servlet config object. Since it's a local method, you just need to call it by calling the method. Okay, so now we have the config. Using config, you can get the email ID. If you see, there are two methods inside config. If you are using get method, get init parameter, and then get init parameter names. Okay, so we are using get init parameter. Since we know the name, it is email, and then save it. So we print that according to. We're just printing it to the address. Okay, so it is email ID. Okay, so let's run this program and see what is happening. if you see in the console, since we have overridden the init method, here the init method is called automatically is printed out. Okay, we didn't call it on our own from a service method or from any main method. The Tomcat container is responsible for calling it and creating the servlet config object. So now when you go to the browser and give okay, so now the URL I've copied and pasted it here. So when I click on the enter, it will go to the first servlet. It's doing null pointer exception at line 45. Show the load line number. Okay, this email is not coming. Why is it? Email. Just a minute. I have to see why this error is going. We have this get servlet config is called, but there's an error in web.xml file. Just a minute.
Best time live translation movements Chennai ashram మంచిగా మంచిగా అవుతుంది చెప్పు యా ఐ నో నువ్వు ఫస్ట్ టైం ఇచ్చినాక నాకు చెప్పిన ఉంటుంది ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ అందుకే రాత్రి మళ్ళీ సెలెక్ట్ అయిన ఒక్కసారి ఇవ్వరాను మంచిగా సో ఈ మంత్ ఎండింగ్ వెళ్తాం 19th వెళ్తున్నావా ఓకే ఈసారి అయిపోతుంది ఓకే
మ్యూట్ పెట్టండి సిస్టమ్ మాట్లాడేది మొత్తం వినిపిస్తుంది ఇక్కడ హలో ఆదిత్య హలో
So you can hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah. So the change that I've made is I've changed this Java doubly in XML and S. I mean, this is the namespace that we are using to Java because it is not able to get the tag from this link actually. Okay, so that's why I've changed it, and now there's no error in it. And the next thing that I'm gonna do is we just see how you can get the servlet name, that is the logical name of the servlet in one step. And see, I've used get servlet name to get the logical name from the servlet config object, and I'm just printing it. So we'll look at it detailedly next time, but once this init parameter is done. So I've stopped the server. Let me clean the project so that it will build again, and everything will be removed, the .class files and all such stuff. So it is clean. Let's run this on the server again and then see what happens now. Okay. Oh, it's still coming with that. Should be working. Just give me a minute, guys. I'll look at it. I'll just stop my screen sharing. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. మధ్యలో చిన్న బ్రేక్. ఓకే, లేదు, నేను కాల్ చేసి వెంటనే కట్ చేసినాను. కట్ చేస్తే శ్రవణ్ కాల్ వచ్చింది కదా, మళ్ళీ నువ్వు నేను సౌమ్య అంటే సరే ఇప్పుడు కాల్ చేస్తున్నారు కదా అని నేను అడిగాను అర్జెంటా అని. నేను వెంటనే కట్ చేసిన, కాల్ ఎట్లా పోయిందా అనుకుంటున్నా. ఎక్కడ ఉన్నారు?
క్లాస్ స్టక్
బ్రేక్
అన్నారా?
బ్రేక్ అంటే ఆయన ఒకటి చెక్ చేసుకొని చెప్తా అన్నాడు. ఇంట్లోనే ఉన్నారా? లేదా ఆయనకు ఏదో డౌట్ ఉంది. ఇంట్లో ఉన్నారా? ఏం లేదు, నీకు విషయం చెప్తామని, మంచి మాటలు చెప్తామని. మంచిగా తిను. అట్లెట్లా తెలిసింది సౌమ్య? ఏముండొచ్చు చెప్పు. నేను ఎందుకు చెప్తా సౌమ్య అట్లా? నేను ఎందుకు చెప్తా అసలు? చెప్పాను నేను అట్లా? నేను ఇబ్బంది పెట్టే పనులు ఏమైనా చెప్తాను. వాట్ ఐ మీన్ టు సే, ఇప్పుడు జాబ్ నీకు ముఖ్యం కదా, అది నేను అన్నది. అది నువ్వు చదివితే నీకు ఇబ్బంది అని కాదు. అదేదో నువ్వు చదవవు అని అనట్లేదు. నేను అట్లా అనట్లేదు, ఇబ్బంది పెట్టట్లేదు.
I'm just looking at the example that I was giving, so I'm just looking at it.
అది కాదు, ఇక మాట్లాడుతున్నా. నేను స్క్రీన్ రికార్డర్ పెట్టినా,
Okay, the reason could be one place. I'm not able to find it now, but it is like, since we are overriding the init method and we are actually calling this init method and creating the servlet configure, it is not able to set the value of whatever parameters that are being created. So what I'm going for now is I'm using this generic servlet and using the same example. I'm just placing generic servlet example, not the servlet one, so that you will get the init parameter here. So let's see whether this will work or not. Okay, that's what I've tried doing now. I didn't execute it, so we'll see now. Okay, I place the same code in generic servlet, and the link to this logic.html will go to the second URL. And the second URL is a generic servlet class. Okay, so let me run this on the server. This could be right. The config object, whatever we are getting, no, it is not having anything. It is just a object creation is done in the init method that we have overridden, and there's nothing inside it. That might be the reason. Stop. It is stopping now. It will start in a minute. Okay. Okay, it is restarting. Okay, it is not yet deployed. We'll remove this. It is saying stopped here, but still it is started. I don't know what happened. What's happening? It's still showing the first servlet because we have changed it and it is not actually deployed. So what I'll do is I'll restart my Eclipse. It is giving me some problem. Okay, so it's already started. We'll remove this once again. I'll restart my server. Sometimes, you know, Eclipse behave weirdly. Restart. Because the build is not actually happening. If you see, we are mapping that URL to the second URL mapping, which should go to generic servlet, and our code should execute. Even if there is an error, it should show that generic servlet is not working at our line, whatever we have mentioned, but it's showing first servlet still. So, you know, that is not correct. System is slow. I'm sorry for that. It is reloading, I guess. Yeah. It is very slow. I don't know why it is behaving like this. Let's see if this works. We'll see how it goes, and then otherwise we'll stop the class, and maybe I have to restart my machine. Did anyone has any doubts that we have discussed in the earlier classes? Anyone practiced whatever we have discussed till now? Or no practice, no doubts? Okay, finally it loaded up. It was very slow. So we have modified the code in generic servlet. If you see, you're getting the get servlet config here, and web.xml file should be modified for this to happen. So init parameters, now it's in generic servlet, and then that's it, we are done. So login.html, it should go to the second URL button, because this servlet only will be called whenever this URL comes up on the screen. So let me run on this server. It's still showing next one. Okay, I got that. It is not loading up, guys. It's still showing me the same error. First line. Let me check it one more time. Resource. So it is still pointing to the home. I think I should close the browser. Yeah. So much. Okay, to remove the cookies now. Okay, now it has changed. Let's see whether this will work or not. Okay, now if you see, the example is from generic servlet. The generic servlet is being called, and the email, we can see that here. The logical name is second. This we are getting it from the config object. So if you see, the logical name is logical name. What is the logical name? It is the name that we have mentioned in the servlet hyphen name tag. Okay, so that is how we are getting that, and we have not printed email here, but we will be getting it. We'll show the email now. Okay, so let me write out that down. Okay, so now we are printing the email ID, whatever we got from the init parameter, and so let's see this. So the init message is called automatically. Let's see whether this will open it. Not this time. Okay, the email coming from the init parameter is aditya.v@abc.com. Okay, so now we are getting it, and the reason that we did not get it in the first servlet is, if you see here, you are overriding the init parameter and you are actually creating it on your own. I mean, this one, you are creating a new servlet config object without anything. So that means you are just it is like initializing a variable with some empty value. So that is the reason when you call the get servlet config, this method will be called and servlet config object will be returned. So that means whatever is created here will be returned, and this will not have anything. That means no init parameters, no logical name. It will not have anything. It is just an empty variable which is of type servlet config, and when you try to get the name or the email ID, anything you try to call on it, it will be a null pointer exception, because there's nothing inside it called as email, or there is nothing called set up as servlet the servlet name, logical name. And the other way that you can achieve this, how can you achieve this in the case of servlet interfaces if you are overriding init method, is you can call the super init method. Like if you want to call the super method or whatever method that is present in the super class, you have to use super and init. See, basically, if you see, since object is a superclass of all the classes in Java, when you call super, it is actually giving me all the methods which I can call it with the super keyword. So that is the reason it is coming like that. But I was wondering why init method is not coming. Okay. So if I say init, you know this concept, right? Super should be the first keyword in every method if you are calling it superclass constructor. Maybe it is not coming because since the superclass constructor will be called only if it is an abstract class. This is, if you see, the servlet is an interface and you cannot call a superclass interface. It is not a superclass. It is a what do you call it? It is a interface. That is the reason it will not have any implementation and you cannot see the super.init. But this can be done in generic servlet, because this generic servlet superclass, this is superclass. I'll do it here also. Okay, we'll do it because no, interfaces are not abstract classes. No. Interfaces are only interfaces. There's no concept called as they may be called, or partially they can call them as abstract classes. Because see, abstract classes, if you remember, or you can if you can recollect, abstract classes can have abstract methods and non-abstract methods also. But interface does not have non-abstract methods. All the methods declared in interface does not have an method implementation. That means it doesn't have a body and they are all abstract. But in abstract class it's not the case. Abstract class can have non-abstract methods and it can have abstract methods. And a class is called an abstract if there is more than one abstract method. Understood? And now see, here you are extending it from the generic servlet, and now, yeah, and now see here in this example, generic servlet example, my class is extending superclass. This is a superclass, right, for this class. So now here in generic servlet abstract class, the init method implementation is there. Now if I try to override it, okay, so we'll try to override the init method. We'll just type init and okay, so now I'm overriding it. If you see the first line, it is super.init. Okay, so this method, this is the line that we are actually expecting. And why this has come? Because for your class, generic servlet is a super class, and when you want to call the super class methods, you can call super dot, and if you see, there are so many methods here. Earlier we don't have this methods, we just had the object class methods because it is an interface, and there are no method implementation as an interface, and that is the reason we did not get anything. Now since your superclass is just generic servlet, which is an abstract class, and it has many methods inside it. By what are the methods? Get init parameter name, servlet config, context info, hash code, and this is again object class. You can see after this init void, and you can see what is the superclass it is coming from. You can have init method, you can add servlet init method. So now if you get this, okay, so this way you can call the superclass init if you are trying to override it and you want to still execute the first init superclass method, right? So this is why it is not working in this place. And in the same manner you can do it in HTTP servlet also. We try to change this example. You want to have a look at HTTP servlet, or we'll just move on to the next init parameters? Will you try this? Or did you try the examples that I've explained yesterday? Did you try HTTP servlet, do get and do post? How many of you tried?
Yeah, I
can't
tried.
see you, so you have to speak up. Only one student or one guy does it. What about others? You don't have the softwares, you don't have the time.
Yeah, Aditya, one question actually. I tried that, but it is like every time it is saving lot of cookies. Even though I stopped and restarted the server, still it is giving the old output. So today, almost like 3 to 4 times, I closed my Eclipse software again. I reopened. Then I started execution. Is there any solution? Because I even stopped the server, again restarted, but still it is showing the old output.
So see, now I got the same type of error. I started and restarted it a couple of times, but I couldn't get it on the browser. So did you close the browser and remove the cookies on the browser side, on the
Yeah,
client side?
I did everything, but still
What is the browser you are using?
it's Google Chrome.
Google Chrome.
Anyway.
So what is the servlet you are extending from? Is it servlet, HTTP servlet, or generic servlet?
It's generic servlet actually.
Okay, and you have overridden the service method.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do?
I just tried to print a statement. That's it.
Okay. Okay, fine. So one reason could be the one already which you have tried. Just close the browser and open a new session, or remove cookies couple of times in the same browser. Close the browser and then close Eclipse. Restart it again and then see whether it is happening or not.
Yeah.
And the second reason could be your URL pattern that you have mentioned here. Did you change that from one place to another? So is it happening there, or in your web.xml file did you change what you are expecting to come?
Yeah, I changed that one. It's not a
Okay,
problem.
okay,
I changed the
fine.
URL pattern, class name, and servlet name, everything. But
Okay,
anyway, I got the output. But the thing is, I have to close the Eclipse again, reopen the Eclipse. That's what I'm facing the problem. I got the
you know,
output.
yeah, see, okay, okay. Since this is a process of development, what happens is once you try to develop something, this happens with JavaScript and CSS also. I mean, every JavaScript library, if you take anything, jQuery, Vue, Exijs, AngularJS, or normal JavaScript also, when you're in development phase, what happens is your browser actually saves the cookies, okay?
Okay.
And it is like your page is already there and you're just trying to reload it, but it doesn't happen. So at the time of development, these kind of problems will occur, but once it is already developed and there is a code which is fully developed, then you will not have this kind of problems. That's why, users, we never see users complaining about these kinds of things.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
since it's development, it is actually common you get these kinds of things. Even now I got it, right?
Yeah.
So it is a common, you know,
Yeah.
task we actually do while development of
Okay.
web applications.
Okay.
Okay, and with Eclipse also, sometimes, since this is a small project you might be using or whatever we are seeing here, if there are like 500 classes, you change only one class and maybe 2 or 3 lines you change, and when you try to deploy it, the change will not be there. What happens at that point of time is uh, your Java code, whatever .class file, will not be replaced and deployed in the web server. The old .class file will be there, and you will be seeing the same thing all the time. You might be wondering what is happening, why it is not coming up. But the reason is you have to clean the build folder where the .class files are created. Sometimes it happens, it will not overwrite the .class file with your new file. It will keep the old one. So you deploy the old one and you try to see why it is not working, because it has the old file. Eclipse behaves like that, so you have to remove it. That's why, even it's a small project, you make a habit of going to project, cleaning it, and then you select whatever project you want, or you clean the entire project, whatever are there. And so this will make sure that the .class files or the build folders are cleaned properly, that means removed properly, and then the new .class files are compiled and placed at the appropriate location, and then you deploy the correct var file or the correct classes. So this way you can avoid some of the errors, but this browser thing is unavoidable. You have to face it or you have to deal with it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry for the delay. I mean, this error, I didn't expect this with Servlet, but later on I got the reason. That's why I could able to explain you. Okay, so
No problem.
that's the concept with init parameter. Now we are off the track. Again, I'm sorry for the mistakes that I was doing. So there are two things that we have seen here. One is getting the servlet logical name, and the other one is getting the init parameter. So we have seen the two things. Now the other thing that we want to try is how you can get all the init parameters using enumeration. So I mean, this maybe you get in the interview. I don't know, depending on the experience of the guy who is interviewing you. So, but let's see how you can do it. So now there are two input parameters. Okay. Okay, so that's not my phone number, it's this number. So now we have two init parameters. Let's make it 3 or 4 so that we'll have a couple of for loop. Okay, so these are some parameters, and I mean, depending on the requirement, you need to put some other values. These are just dummy values I'm going to put here. And now coming to generic servlet, we are going to change whatever we have defined now. So we are using init parameter. Let's keep it that way. But we will be doing get init parameters, name parameter names. by using config object. Okay, and this returns an enumeration. You have to remember that enumeration is something which is there in Java util package, which will help you enumerate between some of the same kind of elements. Okay, it's written all the string values. So while this is a loop, e dot has more elements. Let me stop the server. It is actually building automatically and then restarting, and it is deploying it. Once it is done, then only we'll start it. Okay, so okay, it stopped. I'm just printing all the values, guys. There's nothing moving here. Okay, E has more element, E dot next element. Okay, so we'll be seeing this on the page itself. Let's clean it. Stopped. Sometimes it is already deployed, so it might be a good idea to remove whatever is already deployed and then run this application.
Okay, we are restarting it. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Okay, now you see the value is 1, 2, 3, whatever values that are given in the init parameter. Okay, so this is first name, last name, email address, and phone number. So this is how you can get the values. And so here what I've done is, since e.next element is returning an object, I just typecasted it into string. Since get init parameter takes only string, so that is the reason we are able to see the values now. Okay, any questions in getting the parameters or how you can use them? Or servlet config object?
Yeah, no questions.
Because this is very important interview question. The next one would be servlet context. I'm just looking for where I typed the text. I didn't save that. Okay, fine. I have typed the text in some other place, but the next topic, I mean, the notes is not needed. But while I'm sending you, I'll send over with the notes, because there's some modification that I've done with the earlier one, whatever I've sent it to you. I don't know whether you got it or not, but there are a couple of changes. But I'll send it to Shiva. He'll share that with you. Okay. So next one would be servlet context object. So servlet context and servlet config looks similar, but there are a couple of differences between those two. Once you understand servlet config, you can understand context also. Okay. The first difference that is there between config and context is servlet config object is per servlet, but servlet context is per application. Okay. And what do you mean by that is, for example, technically you write init parameter inside a servlet tag. Okay, so that is, this servlet will have a init parameter, and which you can get it from the servlet config object, and servlet config object is only mapped to one servlet. But for the servlet context, what happens is the servlet context is per application. That means whatever context params that you define, context params will come in a minute, but just look at the scope. The scope for servlet config is per application, per servlet, but for servlet context it is per application. Okay, so this is one important point. You can by heart it, there's no problem in it. But if you remember it when you actually do know how to use your servlet context and servlet config objects. Okay, so, and the second one is, if the servlet is deinstantiated, that means if the servlet is destroyed, if the object is destroyed in the Java memory, then the servlet config object will also be destroyed. But whereas coming to servlet context object, first, if the servlet context is initialized at the time of server startup for that application, the servlet context object will be available for the entire application. That means, since I've told you this init parameter values, you can get it, or the servlet config object, you can get it only for one servlet, but with context, you can get the context same object across all the servlets in one application. Okay, that means the scope of servlet context object is across the application. You can access it anywhere until this application is undeployed from the server. The context object will be available in the Tomcat memory. Okay, and now it same like config, the servlet context can contain two kinds of data. One is context parameters data, and the second one is any information that you want to save in the context param. It is like context param only that you can save in the servlet context object. There's no second type of data. Okay. Okay, it is only just the context param. You want to save it across the application, then you can save it. For example, you can use servlet context in your application. For example, if you want to show a common email ID at the bottom of every page, or say for example, if you go to some sites, you can say contact us and then an email ID. So if you want to share that kind of email addresses which may change frequently, you can configure them in the web.xml file under context parameters, because each and every JSP will have that HTML or JSP will have that email ID which is common across the application. So if you want to access it in each and every one, you can do it either in directly HTML page or JSP page, directly typing in the email ID. And then if the problem is, if there is any change in the email ID, you have to again go and change the code. To avoid this kind of situations, you can use context parameter. And how you can use the context parameters is, since it's per application, you can go to the end of the file and declare the context param object.
Yes. ఎప్పుడు స్టార్ట్ వేసుకుని నైట్ అంతసేపు వేసుకోవాలి సీరియల్ ఎక్కడ చదువుతావు ఏం చేయాలి ఎక్కడ చదువుతావు వాట్సాప్లో పిక్ 1980s bit long. Unique call is so.
Arjun?
Yeah.
Okay, check your chart once. Don't mind.
Sorry?
Okay, check the chart once. Chart.
Message చేసింటాడు పాస్ అవుతుంది.
Okay. So context parameter will be given like this, guys, and you can give the param name and value as you have given for init and init param name and value, and you can get the context object from config object. So for now we'll just look at config object now. I want you to practice how you can use servlet config object, because if I tell both in the same day, you will get confused what is this init parameter and context param. So I'll stop here now. Just go and look and write the code which we have used or seen here in the session using servlet config. Then once you write something using servlet config object on your own, and then we'll move to the servlet context object. Okay, so then you'll have some clarity how you can use them using web.xml file and generic servlet or HTTP servlet. Fine. If you have any questions, you can ask me now, or else we can call it today. Or if you have any questions, you can just note down them, and then tomorrow we can ask me in the session at the starting point or at the ending, anytime you want.
ఆదిత్య Yeah, I
Yeah.
have a general question apart from the class. Today, one interviewer asked me a question like, "What is the why we use Spring framework or Hibernate framework in Java? We use. What is the difference? Like, what happened with them? Can you please tell me?
Okay, this is the question.
Why use Spring framework or Hibernate framework? What happens if we don't use them?
Okay, fine. So for this, you need to know what is Spring and Hibernate. So I'll just give one line,
Okay.
okay, so that it'll not waste your time and
Yeah.
confuse you at the same time. So Spring is used to achieve dependency injection. Okay.
Okay.
Dependencies is nothing but creating objects using XML files.
Okay.
Okay. And Hibernate is used to connect to database.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now what is the advantage if you use Spring in your application? For example, if there is a class called maths class, okay?
Okay.
ATH, yes, correct spelling. In your main method, okay, you are using a simple Java application, and in your main method, you have defined this line which will create a object.
Object.
Okay, this M is a reference variable for the maths
Maths
object,
class.
right?
Yeah.
So now this you can achieve using Spring XML configurations.
Okay.
How can you do this? You can do this with the help of that's it, done.
Okay.
Okay, so and it is not that simple like I'm explaining here. The main advantage here is, for example, in maths class, okay, this is a class, maths class, we know that, right? We have to have a class method signature. Okay, in maths class, for example, you have a another class which says algorithm. Okay, algorithm A. For example, there's something like this. Now, what happens here when you create an object with the normal regular maths m equal to new maths, there is a chance that algorithm A object will not be available,
Okay.
or you have not created it. See, this could be a null point exception may come because you just initialize it. You just declared it. You did not initialize it, and when you try to do a dot some value, you will get a null point exception, obviously, right?
Okay.
But with Spring, what happens is it will not let you get that null pointer exception. It will create the internal objects also with this line of code. That means if there is any dependency in your object creation, Spring will take care. Dependency is nothing but this is dependency, right?
Yeah.
For creating maths class, I need to create an algorithm A class.
Yeah.
So Spring will take care of the dependencies of creating the objects. That is the main advantage of creating Spring.
Okay.
Okay, it started like that. It is the core concept of Spring. And the other advantage is Spring has different features, okay, which will help you create MVC based web applications. Okay, it will help you to connect to database using Hibernate. It will have lots of other concepts which are not needed for you to know now, but think of this as a feature. It will help you to develop MVC based web applications. See, the advantage I'll tell you, since you know web.xml now. See, for each and every URL, what you're doing, you're writing a servlet, you're writing a servlet mapping. Again, if there is a URL, you will write this thing. But with Spring MVC, it's a feature. If you're using Spring MVC, you just do it once. Okay, you configure it only once, like only once one configuration will be there in an XML file, and all the URLs will be taken care. So that is an advantage, obviously, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so MVC based web applications you can develop using Spring, and the other one is using Hibernate. And Hibernate itself is simple technology which will just help you to connect to the database.
Okay.
For example, think of it as a structure now. You have JDBC concept which will try to connect to DB. It is the same thing. You have Hibernate which will try to connect to the DB. You have Spring which will try to connect to the DB. So all the three purpose is same. What is that? You have to connect to the DB. So if you take JDBC, for example, it will have 10 lines of code to connect to DB.
Okay.
Okay. Now at present, whereas coming to Hibernate, you have to write 5 lines of code to connect to a DB. That is an obviously advantage over JDBC.
Yeah.
But whereas coming to Spring, you just write 2 lines and then you are done.
Okay.
Okay, so these are the comparisons. If you have the comparison, if you know the technology, then you can tell the advantages or what actually it does.
Yeah. Okay.
For your understanding, I'm explaining at that level.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So anybody, any questions other than like this or anything? Even if I don't know, I'll tell you tomorrow. But please speak out if you have any questions. Okay. Chalo. By then we'll meet tomorrow with servlet context, and then we'll move on to session tracking mechanism. Tomorrow we'll be mostly done with servlet concept, and then we'll move to JSPs.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
ఇలా అయిపోయింది, క్లోజ్ చేసేసాడు.